Hello and welcome back to Many Thoughts. This time we're going to be looking at a article, not because I'm going to rip it apart or anything. It actually does bring up a very good point, and it's actually one of those things that if you are not a video game enthusiast or you're trying to collect older games, maybe from the NES era when you were a kid or the SNES and so on and so forth, it can become quite difficult to spot fake classic games from actual authentic games. Now, it's going to start off with the fake classic games are everywhere. Now, this is somewhat true. If you are looking into your collection, more than likely, if you didn't check originally and get rid of them or just keep them anyway separate, you will more than likely find a fake game. Now, if you bought your collection earlier and earlier in the 90s or the 2000s, even around 2005 and earlier, there aren't as many fakes. But as technology evolved, of course, replicas and repros became more accessible and means more abundant, which means more fakes are in the world. And I do want to talk about repros after this, but they give some basic background on some knockoff Atari cartridges, the 101 NES games, which I'm going to get into why they shouldn't be talking about it, those specifically. Those are a separate thing entirely. And as they say here, first learn all about the real thing, which is very important. If you know enough about the real game, you can get past the easiest of fake quality. Now, why is this important? Because when you have a scammer or you have someone that is faking something counterfeit, they are only trying to get past the initial scan or the initial trick. Whatever it is, maybe it's the label that you look at first, maybe it's the cartridge, maybe it's the little logo at the bottom. All these little tricks they will try and cover up, but in reality it's pretty easy to go under the surface and find out if it's a fake or not. One of the easiest things to, of course, check out if you really are looking for a game cheaply or you're looking for a collection of certain games, you go and look up pictures of the board if they're a cartridge-based game. And one of the things that ultimately you can do is look at the board, and it's pretty easy to determine specific spots. Now, of course, there's going to be some fakes out there that can copy that, but it's usually too much work for flea markets, for other sellers, and eBay. Usually people make a living off selling fakes and repros and stuff like that. So on eBay you have to be incredibly careful. And remember, on eBay you have a safety option. You can message the person, be like, is this a fake or whatever? And if they say no and you get it, well, eBay will help you out there. Though I don't know their exact terms of service on it. Now, you can judge a game by its label. This is very important. This is one of those things that you need to know about for cartridge games collecting specifically. They only use certain fonts on cartridges, as they give a pretty easy example, but when it comes to the SNES games, this font is used a lot, and it's pretty easy to tell when it's faked because the font is not easy to shape under and it's more of a stamp. So, and considering most of these stamps aren't actually used anymore or inkjetted properly anymore, it's actually kind of funny. Another thing that's not pointed out here, which I can't really highlight because I forgot to turn my mouse on, but is actually the purple triangle on some of these games. There's a few of them, and also even the triangle on the cartridge that shows the insert. I know the Genesis had a few of them with the triangle. You can look at that and see how indent it is or how pressed it is, and you can determine if it's a fake cartridge or not. That's very important. Labels are very easy. Not so fantastic plastic. Yeah, one of the things that is very important is that back then, I even have a game right here. You have, I have Boxhole for Game Boy here, but it's decent plastic. It actually is plastic. It's has some weight when you throw it around. Sorry, Boxel, I didn't mean to really do that. But even like, what do I have near me? I don't really have it. I have Game Boy Advance. Even Game Boy Advance, even though it was lighter in the area, you still get a click. Now, of course, some plastic you're gonna find is maybe can kind of fake it to a certain things, but it's pretty easy to tell based on certain weights if you know the weight, especially in N64's era, because there's only 3 kinds of weights for those cartridges, and if you can like get the feel for them, if you have 3, because there are 3 cheap games that are the like weight. One of the most common games, Super Mario 64, is one of the lighter ones actually, and then you have what's the medium weight? The medium weight is actually relatively rare, but I believe GoldenEye is that weight. And then you have the large weight, which is usually the bigger games. It's actually because of the RAM extension and stuff like that. I think Donkey Kong 64 might be one of the heavyweights, but I'm not sure. I do not remember exactly. I could probably check, but yeah. So, and of course, a game cartridge isn't just a label and a shell. Inside is the package. This is where it talks about the circuitry. You can easily tell a fake, as you can see right here on the picture. You can pretty much easily tell a fake if they don't know what they're doing. Now, it is actually incredibly easy for some people to, what they do is they will make a really good fake plastic case for, let's say, Super Mario 64 that sells for a decent amount, and they'll go and grab one of the NHL games or whatever, and one of the other lightweight games or boards, and they'll put it in a case that they made. Now, this board looks very similar, but there are distinct differences. So if you are going out and looking for Super Mario 64, look at specific chips and also basic just lines. These lines in this picture, you can actually see a lot of them are different, and you can look at the prongs that go into the actual N64 and it gets red. If you look at which lines go where, you can actually get patterns and figure out what game you're looking at. Now, of course, you shouldn't have to do that, but people like to scam. And one of the things that is very important is the custom tools. Now, I have one of them right here. This one is the special tool for actually the N64, but there are custom tools needed if you want to open and look at the boards, which if you are going to go into collecting, you should have at least a few sets. One of them I use in my car. I have in my car. It's along with my basic tools in case I break down. But in case I manage to stop at a garage sale or something and I'm kind of suspicious, usually I'm not at garage sales because it's kind of safe, but I'll be like, yo, can I check this out? This seems like it would be good. But at that point, you do have to realize as soon as you ask that, they're going to want more money for it because you're actually looking at it and taking it apart. Or you could just pretty much like buy it from them for whatever they ask and then take it apart in your car and make sure, if not, you can go sell it at Goodwill or something and take the loss. It's all up to whatever you want. So this is another important one. They show a Game Boy thing. This is kind of wrong in a way. So one of the things that's very important about the Game Boy, I'll go back to Boxel here, is you have the little notch on the right if you're facing the picture or the label, or on the left if you're facing the back of the cartridge. But as you can see the notch in the little picture. And one of the things is right below that are usually the lines right next to the Nintendo Game Boy logo, the little imprint of it. And right there is a nice notch, the top of it. And you can actually see it right next to the board. That is the limitation of space for the actual chip or the motherboard or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it a chip. And one of the things is that most Game Boy games will reach that limit. Even if they don't need the whole entire chip, they will use it because it looks uniform and it goes in the case anyway. Now, what is on the right is, of course, a fake one because, I mean, there's not much there anyway, but they made it pretty obvious. But there are a few cases where there are slightly shorter chips, and I don't have one with me, I don't think. Maybe I do. One of the original launch games, I think it's Bugs Bunny actually, but one of the launch games has a shorter chip, and it's slight. It's very slight, but it is shorter. It is not as short as the one on the right, but if it's that short, then it's obviously fake. But do keep in mind with that. And of course, you have the labels. If you memorize these labels, they're all different for each and every console. What type of region you're looking for, such as USA. Usually it's North America that's marked. And a bunch of other stuff. Fake boxes and manuals. Now, this is probably the most hurtful thing in creation, because one of the things that is getting rarer and rarer is boxes, manuals, and I mean, they can go for ridiculous prices. One of the things that astounds me is that Smash Bros. Melee, the manual and the box go for like 20 bucks, while the game itself goes for 60. It's still amazing. These are harder to fake though, in my opinion. One of the things that you have to remember is that inkjet worked completely differently, and it wasn't even inkjet back then, but you have to look at it as the colors are gonna either be faded or way too vibrant for an actual like fake. One of the things that was harder to get was vibrant colors back then, and sometimes they'll go for a mixed color. Pink is one of the easiest ones to tell. If it's a pink box or anything, has a pink color, you can usually tell if it's fake. And that's why it's actually pretty easy to tell with pink. I do know that. Context clues, yeah, there is a little bit. This is specifically for eBay. But this is saying if he has 100 of them listed and has a giant inventory of 1,000 mint condition American games, even though they're located in China, probably not the real thing. Yeah, take some basic common sense, and yeah. And this is kind of a weird thing that I don't really get, because it says, does this game I'm buying even exist? Technically, if you're buying a game, it exists anyway. But if you are collecting and you just happen to buy stuff because you want to, you kind of deserve that, because that, yeah. Now, cartridges, of course, are pretty easy to tell. There's a lot of checks and stuff you can. And I'm going to preface this. Even if you do all the right checks, you're gonna get tricked once or twice. You're maybe gonna, man, I don't need to check. This guy looks real trustworthy. Or even you do all the proper checks and he's just that good at faking it. Now, one of the things that is kind of important about that is you have to learn that if you are collecting, you're gonna get a fake. And it really sucks, and I really wish there weren't fakes in the world. I really wish repros were more obvious, because it's really stupid that they aren't. But it's one of those things that is going to happen. Now, fake CDs, they actually talk about it a little bit, but some of these are still uncracked. What this means is that they don't really have the discs properly that have been cracked. Now, the PlayStation 1 has a very specific security system that is still kind of not broken on the discs, so it's not going to work. Sega Saturn is still baffling people that it works. And then the PlayStation 2, to be honest, the reason it isn't cracked yet is there's so many copies of games, and there is a way to technically transfer a game onto another disc. Same with GameCube as well, though the GameCube is a little harder to manage. But there are a bunch of fake games for the Dreamcast, which is the most important one. The TurboGrafx CD and the Sega CD is a much smaller collection base, but if you're a Dreamcast fan, there are a few fakes out there. Though there are some games that you kind of can't fake properly. And I think that's the end of this article, but I do want to mention something that is kind of brought up and then dropped. So repros are mentioned, or the flash carts right here. That's what they're usually called, where there's multiple of games on one cartridge. It's basically to allow you to play every game without, buying the 101 or the 100 games for the NES, which can get expensive, especially since the cheapest on that console is like $299. You multiply that, you're paying $300, and that's if you're lucky that all 100 games are $299. But one of the things that is kind of really messed up is reproductions. Reproductions, I have no problem being a cheap alternative to play your favorite games from childhood. I have no problem with that. My biggest problem is that they make it so close to the original because they want you to have a great shelf piece, but the problem is it's a reproduction cart. It shouldn't look like a great shelf piece. You're going for the gameplay, not the actual freaking shelf piece. Why is that? I hate it. I really hate that reproductions are in fact so close sometimes. One of the things that is one of the biggest examples of successful reproductions in my opinion is the World's Championships for the NES, which, I mean, if you are into video game collecting, that's one of those things that you will probably figure out just because it's the most popularized. But the reproductions on those are a distinct color. They are made not exactly like an NES shell to make it obvious. So, and also that's one of the fakest games in the world because it's so expensive. But yeah, overall, there's a lot of things you could do to check yourself. CDs are a little harder to fake and a little harder to tell, but there are a few things. One of the things that they mention here is the inner ring on disc should be a product code that matches the disc/art/case or whatever. But this can also be manipulated, kind of, because the code is written in a certain press format. You can actually get these discs to be matched like that. So you can have, let's say you have your flea market guy. He goes and gets a bunch of discs that are pressed and matched to whatever they have, or cases or something, and you just end up getting a fake one that doesn't even read, especially if they don't have a system to check, which, by the way, is usually pretty scummy. If you can't check that it actually works, then I mean you should expect to take a loss always. One of the things that I also want to point out when it comes to discs is that their value could be basically gone with a deep enough scratch. So if you look at the back and you're like, this looks like it was thrown down a blender and it somehow didn't shred, but you might as well just be like, okay dude, sorry, no, and just move on. There's plenty of more games in the sea, and it sucks that discs get ruined that way. With easily bootleg game has been corrected, regrets this error. Okay, well, it's a decent article. I don't think it actually fills in enough when it comes to video game collecting, but maybe if you're trying to get in, this could help you, especially since Pokemon games are the biggest fake in the world. There are so many fake Pokemon games in the world. I have 2 of them, which I got in one of those backpacks I ended up buying. It was filled with other games. They actually had some real games in it, but there was 2 fake Pokemon games, which is just funny as hell. But overall, just be wary, especially if you're going to get into collecting, and above all, just try and use context clues. If you're in a situation, you're in a rundown place, and the person has a shop where he's selling just video games, they're gonna be fake, more than likely. Just use context clues, use your knowledge that you have on the games, and above all, just, if you don't have the money to spend, don't spend. Don't expect a profit out of it. That's probably one of the biggest things I could say. Don't expect a profit. Alright, that'll be it. I hope to see you guys next time. where we'll talk about something else or whatever and have a fun time. So till then.